Have you ever noticed something strange about Alaska's shape on a map? Look closer. That thin strip stretching along Canada's coast doesn't make any sense. But when you zoom in, you can see that Alaska's panhandle runs down the coast of British Columbia, creating one of the most peculiar borders in the world. Behind this bizarre border lies an incredible story of four powerful nations, a gold rush that nearly triggered a war, and what many call the greatest real estate deal in history. What if I told you that strip of land heightened tensions between Canada and Britain, or that it was once worth risking war over? Today, we're diving into the fascinating story of why Alaska looks so weird on a map. Picture this, it's 1741, and Russian explorer Vitus Bering is sailing eastward across the Pacific on a mission from Tsar Peter the Great. Unlike other European explorers who crossed the Atlantic, Bering took the long way around, venturing into completely uncharted waters. After an initial failed attempt, Bering finally reached Alaska on his second voyage. But instead of a hero's welcome back home, tragedy struck. Disease ravaged the crew. Bering himself was stranded on an uninhabited Pacific island, where he died, now fittingly named Bering Island. But here's where it gets interesting. A second ship from the expedition made it safely back to Russia, carrying something that would change everything: sea otter pelts. These weren't just any furs, they were so valuable they earned the nickname soft gold. Chinese aristocracy coveted these luxurious pelts as status symbols. A single sea otter pelt could make a Russian trader wealthy, and Alaska had thousands of them. Suddenly, Russia had a gold rush on its hands, but for fur, not metal. Unlike other European powers racing to claim inland territories, Russia focused purely on controlling the coastline. That's why Russian America, yes, that was its official name, took such a strange shape, hugging the Pacific shore. By the late 18th century, Russian territory clung to the coast of what's now Alaska. Meanwhile, British territory in North America was limited to eastern regions, with the Mississippi River as its western boundary after 1763. Between them lay a massive unclaimed wilderness. But as Britain pushed westward and the newly formed United States expanded, three rival powers soon found themselves eyeing the same profitable coastline. By the 1820s, American and British traders were encroaching on Russia's fur monopoly. Even worse for the Russians, American traders were paying indigenous Alaskans more for their furs and smuggling them out of Russian territory. In 1821, Emperor Alexander I had enough. He issued a proclamation declaring that only Russians could use these waters for commerce and that foreign vessels needed to stay 100 miles from the coastline. Imagine the outrage. Britain and America both protested, threatening retaliation. The situation was a powder keg ready to explode. Two crucial treaties would define Alaska's strange border forever. First, in 1824, Russia and America struck a deal. They agreed on a specific point on the map called 54 degrees 40 minutes north, just north of modern-day Prince Rupert in British Columbia. Russia wouldn't move south of this line, and America wouldn't move north. The very next year, Russia negotiated with Britain. Again, they settled on the 54 degrees 40 minutes north as Alaska's southern boundary. But here's where it gets complicated. Russia wasn't interested in the interior, they just wanted the coast. So the border was drawn as a narrow strip following the coastline and extending inland just 56 kilometers, or 10 marine leagues as they called it. But here's the critical mistake. The region was so mountainous and unexplored that surveyors couldn't properly map it. Many boundaries were left completely undefined. This vague language created the famous Panhandle, that weird strip of Alaska stretching down British Columbia's coast. And like most colonial borders, these lines were drawn with zero consideration for the indigenous peoples who had lived there for thousands of years. Several tribes found their ancestral territories suddenly split between different imperial powers. North of the 56th parallel, things got simpler. The border would follow the 141st meridian straight north to the Arctic Ocean. But one question remained dangerously unanswered. Where exactly did the coastal barrier begin? At the mainland shore or at the outer islands? This seemingly minor detail would later push Canada and America to the brink of war. By 1867, Russia was in trouble. They'd been defeated in the Crimean War and feared Britain might simply take Alaska by force. Meanwhile, sea otters had been hunted nearly to extinction, making the territory less valuable. With their empire overextended and their eyes shifting to Central Asia, Russian Tsar Alexander II made a fateful decision: sell Alaska to the United States. The price? A mere $7.2 million, about 2 cents per acre. When adjusted for inflation, that's roughly $150 million for a territory now worth trillions. No wonder it's called the greatest real estate deal of all time. While the fur trade had declined, the Panhandle's waters were teeming with salmon, and the land held timber, minerals, and resources yet to be discovered. For America, this was just another expansion in their march across the continent. They'd already purchased territory from Spain and France. Why not Russia too? But 1867 was significant for another reason. It was the same year the Canadian Confederation formed. 4 years later, British Columbia joined Canada in 1871, transforming the Alaskan Panhandle from a Russian-Britain border into a US-Canada one. And that's when the problems began. Canada immediately requested an official survey of the Panhandle to pinpoint the exact location of the border. The US refused, claiming it would be too expensive. This vague border might have remained a mere diplomatic irritation if not for what happened next, an event that nearly sparked a war between the US and Canada. August 16, 1896. Gold discovered near Klondike in northwest Canada. Word spread like wildfire. Over 100,000 people flooded into the region chasing fortune. By summer 1898, the previously empty wilderness had sprouted Dawson City, home to 30,000 to 50,000 gold-crazed prospectors. Between 1896 and 1899, miners pulled $29 million in gold from the frozen ground, over $1 billion in today's money. But there was a problem. The easiest way to reach the gold fields was to sail up the Pacific, through the Alaskan Panhandle, then cross back into Canada. Suddenly, that vague border became critically important. Look at Lynn Canal, a fjord on the Panhandle. If you interpret the western coast of the fjord as the coastal border and move 56 kilometers eastward, you'd technically be in Canadian territory. This would give Canada direct access to the Pacific through Skagway. Canada and America had completely different interpretations of where the border should be. So Canada acted as if it was their territory. They attempted to assert control, raising tensions with American prospectors who threatened retaliation. The Canadians retreated to Chilkoot Pass and White Pass, then established a 200-man army unit called the Yukon Field Force in the Yukon to maintain order. Tensions escalated quickly. President Theodore Roosevelt took a hardline stance, deploying troops and signaling readiness to defend U.S. claims. Two proud nations both claiming the same vital territory, with thousands of armed civilians on the ground and gold in their eyes. War seemed inevitable. Rather than fight, the Americans and Canadians agreed to settle things through a tribunal. A commission of jurists was formed: 3 Americans, 2 Canadians, and 1 British politician. Canada, still part of the British Empire, naturally assumed the British representative would take their side. They were wrong. In a shocking twist, Lord Alverstone sided with the Americans on almost every issue. He agreed the coastal border should be at the mainland, not the islands, and supported the American interpretation of the southern AB line. The Canadians were outnumbered 4-2. So outraged were they by this perceived betrayal that they refused to sign the agreements. it didn't matter, the decision went ahead anyway. Lord Alverstone instantly became one of the most hated figures in Canada. Canadians believed they were sacrificed to maintain Britain's good relations with America. Others argue Alverstone simply thought the American position was more reasonable. In 1905, surveyors from both nations began the arduous work of marking the border. They ventured into remote mountains never before mapped, using boats, pack horses, and backpacks to reach the wilderness. The 141st meridian was marked with 191 monuments across 350 miles of land. Along the Yukon River Valley, crews cut a straight line through dense forest. Thomas Riggs, a crew chief for the International Boundary Commission, spent 8 summers in the Alaskan wilderness on this project. When he finally completed the task in 1914, he sent a poignant telegram: "Regret my work completed." He'd fallen in love with the untamed beauty of the land. The most fascinating part? This border dispute had consequences far beyond Alaska. It's been credited with fueling Canada's desire for greater independence from the British Empire. Some historians argue it also indirectly contributed to Canada rejecting a free trade deal with the US in 1911, a border dispute that shaped two nations. Today, the US-Canada border is the largest undefended border in the world. These nations have become close allies with deep economic, military, and cultural ties. But Alaska's strange border still creates some bizarre situations. Take the town of Hyder, Alaska. It's completely isolated from the rest of Alaska, but sits right next to the Canadian town of Stewart. This geographic quirk has created a uniquely blended community. Residents of Hyder celebrate both Canadian and American holidays. They use British Columbia's telephone area code. Most set their clocks to Canadian time for convenience, and businesses happily accept both US and Canadian dollars. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy captured the spirit of this unique relationship when he addressed the Canadian Parliament. Geography has made us neighbors, history has made us friends, economics has made us partners, and necessity has made us allies. Today, crossing this historic border is often barely noticeable. Canadian writer Diane Selkirk sailed near the AB line in 2019 and wrote, "At some point as we sailed through the waves, we left Canadian waters and entered the US. But really, the only way we knew we'd travel from one country to the next is that our electronics jumped back an hour to Alaska Standard Time." Adventure seekers can even travel the entire Inside Passage by canoe or kayak from Washington State to Alaska. Writer Susan Conrad completed this journey in 2010, later writing 66 days, 1,200 miles, countless dark chocolate bars, and a million magical moments later, I laid my paddle down in Juneau, Alaska. What began as a territorial dispute between 4 imperial powers has evolved into one of the most peaceful borders on Earth. Despite causing tensions between Russia, Britain, America, and Canada, not a single battle was ever fought over this land. Alaska's bizarre border stands as a testament to the power of diplomacy, and a reminder that sometimes the best deals in history come from the strangest circumstances. The next time you look at a map and notice Alaska's weird shape, remember, you're looking at the aftermath of history's greatest real estate deal, a gold rush that nearly sparked a war, and a border dispute that helped shape two nations. All for just 2 cents an acre.